How's everybody doing tonight?
Hey.
A little nervous, but it'll be okay.
All right, everybody, we're just waiting for some more people to come on before we get started.
You're both going to do great.
We'll give it maybe 1 or 2 more minutes because it's 6:30 and just make sure everybody's on. All righty, Rich, why don't you go ahead and get us started?
Good evening and welcome to the Public School Employees of Washington's Legislative Unconference. Tonight is the third night of events diving into the PSE issues and priorities for the 2021 legislative session. I have the pleasure of introducing our speakers for this evening. Please join me in welcoming Cheryl Prozak, Zone 2 Legislative Council Member, and Jody Japp, Zone 11 Legislative Council Member. I want to remind you that this webinar is being recorded and will be available on the events page of the member portal. Also, there will be an unconference or discussion session after this webinar, which will also be recorded. The unconference session is a different link, which can be found on the events page of the member portal and in the chat window of this webinar. Questions during the presentation should be limited, as the discussion following will be a time for you to bring them forward. Thank you, Cheryl and Jody, for joining us. I now turn this over to you.
Again, we just want to thank everybody for coming to the 2020 election session. And Jennifer, if you would go to slide 2, I guess we would start. What was in store for 2020? Well, 2020 was a very, very busy year. There was the presidential primary on March 10th, the primary election on the August 4th, and the general election November 3rd. We did interviews and researched this all while dealing with a pandemic that would change how we would interact with our representatives. We had to walk away from doing in-person meetings and started living our lives on Zoom. So all of our statewide offices were up for election, like the governor, the lieutenant governor, OSPI, etc. All 98 House members were up for election, and 24 of the 50 Senate seats were up for election. That meant for a lot of interviews and a lot of opportunities to meet with our different representatives. There were 10 congressional representatives, the presidential primary, and the election, and then all the ballot measures. Again, this was an incredibly busy year where we had to become very creative on how we were going to relate with our representatives. Jody, if you would like to take the next slide.
Thank you. Thank you, Cheryl. This was a really fun year for me. It's only my 3rd year. I have not been an activist for a very long time. And Rick really taught me a lot. One of the things I really love is when we're in an election cycle, the balance of power shifts. So the candidates need us. We hold the power, whether it's they need us to support them through word of mouth, talking to our friends, sharing with our members our positive feelings about them, or whether it's through a financial endorsement. On the other hand, when we go to Olympia, we are asking them for things that we want. So they hold the power. And I absolutely loved the idea of that shift. And I really love working with legislators and interviewing candidates during an election cycle when we hold the power. And Jennifer, I think we're ready for the next slide. So we're going to talk a little bit about the endorsement process. First, we'll just start with how you even have why you have a legislative council. We are elected at state convention for 2-year terms. And because COVID kind of kept us all apart, every single seat on council will be open for election this year. And I'm so sorry I lost my place. I'm a lunch lady. This is not my forte. One thing I think is important for everyone to understand, the new candidate interviews are great. They're an amazing way to start building a relationship with future legislators. And the process that we use is very specific to PSE and to our members. The questions that we ask are, do they know who we are? Do they know what we do? Do they understand the importance of classified work? Do they support education? Do they support funding education? Those are things that really, really matter to us. And this is why we have a very specific list of interview questions that Rick helps us with, but it's all very focused on our PSE's legislative platform. And Cheryl has some great tips for how to review incumbents' records.
Thanks, Jody. I've been researching legislators since the 80s, and I've always done it the same way. I look at their voting records. I go back through the bills. We're still on slide 4, Jennifer. I look at their voting records. You can research your representatives through leg.wa.gov. You can find everything that you want to find about your legislator by going through the legislative website. I look at the bills that are in relation to our platform, and I start watching them. I sign up for the my legislative district's representatives Facebook. I become friends with them. I follow them. I get on their Twitter. I respond back and forth. I start developing my relationships with them. I also can get a feel on how they feel about a particular topic based on some of their social media. Another great thing to do is to sign up off of leg.wa.gov, again, off their e-newsletters. Every representative, your senators and your representatives send out e-newsletters, and they will give you a wealth of information. They'll show their political stand. They'll give you insights to bills that are moving, which ones are stalling, and then some kind of personal insights to them. The e-newsletters right now are pretty critical. We're going to be handling this session in an electronic state. All our contacts with our representatives are going to be electronically, either through Zoom, phone calls, emails. We're not going to be in Olympia and seeing them face to face. So it's very important to get on all of their electronic medium. I've asked representative questions based on their voting records. I've asked them, hey, I saw this had 4 amendments. This particular House bill had 4 amendments. I see that you voted 3 times in favor of this, and the 4th time you voted against it. Can you share with me what changed your mind? Had I not looked at the voting records, I wouldn't have known. It gave me an opportunity to see the reason behind. And one in particular from last year was in relation to House Bill 1888. I was for that, and I said, I saw that. But the last amendment came out. He did not like the wording and felt that the constituents in the state of Washington were going to be too vulnerable to releasing public information, so he voted against it. Knowing that about him allowed me to have a different perspective on how he was protecting his constituents. Having not seen the vote, having not reached out, having not built a relationship, I would have had a different opinion of that specific legislator. So it's very, very important. Another great way that you can stay informed and follow your legislative platform issues is by watching TVW. You can get on and follow sessions, Senate and House. So with that, I think we can move on to the next slide. Kind of dovetails right into that. Let me get mine pulled up. In the process of elections, the council members meet between the Government Relations Department and council members. We met about 50 hours of meetings individually and corporately. We put a lot of work in and a lot of relationship building. This process was used the same for the primary and for the general election. We would get together, we would interview candidates, we'd come back together as a council and we would discuss. We conducted over 80 hours of endorsement interviews. All of those interviews were done by Zoom. Zoom allowed us the opportunity to have longer meetings, to have more people involved in the interview process, where some of us may not have been able to drive to Olympia to be a part of that interview. The ability of having a meeting on Zoom made it open for more council members to be involved in more interviews, to give us a broader spectrum on what we needed to endorse, who we needed to endorse, and why. Jody, would you like to take the next 3 points?
I'd love to. Thank you, Cheryl. Again, the full council met for at least 50 hours, I think starting at the end of April. And actually, I am a big fan of Zoom. I think it's opened up a lot more opportunity for us as a council, as well as different ways of meeting with our candidates or with our legislators, as Cheryl referenced. So what we do, we've gone and we've conducted interviews, we've researched as much as we can on candidates. And so then we again have full council meetings, and we go around and around and we present our interviews, our thoughts on our candidates, what they support, why we like them, and the recommendation, and then we recommend our endorsement. We have a lot of conversation. We vote on this, and then when we're done with our, and I think this takes us 2 full, meetings. I think we spend 6 to 8 hours just amongst the 13 of us. And once we've made our decisions and voted on who we as a council choose to endorse, then we send those recommendations on to the board of directors. And those are presented to the board of directors. They make their own vote. And once it's approved, the council members get to go deliver these endorsements to candidates, which is really a blast. It's really fun. For me, I feel like I've done good work. I've done due diligence. I have done the best research I can and ask good questions in my interviews. I feel really good about handing over our endorsement. Well, the candidate is really excited about that too. And for me, I just feel that's another great way to continue building relationships, because that's what we need to do. We need to talk to these people in Olympia. And if we have a really good relationship with them, it's a lot easier. So that's how that worked. And it was really great. It was really fun this year. And thank you, Jennifer. I think we're ready for the next slide.
Sorry about that. Well, these were a part of my experiences. I wanted to try to represent all the different legislators that I did meet with through the primary and the general election. They're not quite all there. This was an incredible experience. My legislative interest started in the 80s, as I said. I've lobbied all up and down the Mississippi River for different reasons. Then when I moved to Spokane, I became immediately involved with the Arc of Spokane, lobbying for disability rights because I have a disabled son. The passion and burn that I had for legislative and lobbying and fighting has been in me for a long time. My father was the same way, so I've just carried it on. My very first year of being hired at the school district was 6 years ago. I went to convention right away. My very first year of employment and my very first convention, I ran to be on the legislative council. I knew that that's where my passion was, and I knew that I could bring a wealth of knowledge to that. It took me till this year to get in, but that's just the way elections are. We've built incredible relationships with our legislators through this election process of interviewing them, meeting them. It's a wonderful feeling to meet with your legislators. There is not an unhappy face in any of those pictures. They are warm to us. They are receptive to hear our platform. They are receptive to hear our struggles. They become personally involved in some of the issues, and I've got several of those in those photos that call me and check back and said, hey, what's going on with your district? Had I not had the opportunity of being on the council and having the ability to endorse, deliver checks, I would have not had the ear to those representatives at the degree that I have now. We are building strong working relationships where they hear what we need. We're very diligent in hammering the legislative platform. I was very fortunate the next year of my employment to receive the PSE internship and be mentored by Doug Nelson. To see his passion really put a fire in me when I watched his passion over the paraeducator bill. And I thought, he's been fighting this for 17 years. It was just amazing. And then to learn a greater depth of the ins and outs of the background, the behind the scenes legislation that takes place, the coffee shops, the talking to the people and finding things out, finding who to talk to, when to talk to them to help get a bill processed. Again, I cannot say enough for the experience of being on the council. It has broadened our horizon. It has widened my depth of understanding of the Washington laws and processes. Education was not my lobbying experience, so this is new to me, just as it is to Jody. But we've built incredible relationships that will last for a long time. And the PSE Council and state, we have been very successful over the years. If you look at the PSE accomplishments, you can see the hard work that goes into this and the relationships that are built. I don't think I have much more to add on that. That the opportunity to be involved and build a relationship with your legislators is the key to getting bills changed. You do not have to be on the council to have that relationship. All you have to do is put the effort out, reach out to them and talk to them one-on-one and build a relationship. And I just want to encourage you all to remember that and to do it on your own, or call one of your council members and we'll help you. So Jody, I'm going to throw this to you for your experiences, which were amazing.
Thanks, Cheryl. I did have amazing experiences. A little bit of my story is I came to political activity since I joined PSE. My chapter organized in 2014, and I went to my first legislative conference. Oh my gosh, in 2015. 2015. And I've always, kind of followed local and federal politics, and I've always had opinions, but to actually be taught about a platform and what it means to people, and to go speak to my legislators like in their office, and I found out, oh my gosh, even though I knew this, I learned this in school. Yes, I can. And yes, they work for me. It was kind of overwhelming. it still kind of is. It was extremely empowering, and I've learned so much through that journey. I don't think I could even put it all into words. Some of it is purely selfish. I've gained a lot of self-confidence. I've gained a lot of knowledge. Those things are important to me. Building relationships is fun, is great. I did not have the opportunity to work closely with Doug Nelson. I always thought he was one of the smartest people I'd ever listened to. But I didn't get an opportunity to work as closely as Cheryl did. What I have found this year, my third year on the council, Rick Chisa and Jennifer McMaster have been amazing. And I'm sure Doug was too. But it's just been great. And I'm going to refer back to Rick just reminding me, balance of power is different in an election cycle. You hold the power when you make those phone calls and have those meetings. And it kind of just shifted the way I think about things. So I loved this election cycle. One of my favorite parts is we had several new candidates in a couple of the districts within my zone. So that was fun. In this picture, well, the big picture is John Lubbock. He's in the 44th, and I've met with him many times. He's an incumbent. He did win again. Really gracious, wonderful man. He actually cooks a lot, and he brought me some of his own special Cajun seasoning. So I do think we're working on a good relationship. Up in the top, Shelley Kloba. She's in the first. She came up from the PTA. So interesting. She started out in schools. That's kind of, how I got started. Who knows? I'm not sure I'd ever run for office, but it's interesting to think about. And then in the middle there, we have Emily Wicks in the 38th. She's great. She's fun. She's smart. She has great ideas. And I think we're going to meet her Friday at our open house. April Berg in the 44th. She has served on 2 different school boards. She has 6 children. She is super smart. She has great ideas, and really wants to invest in education. So it was just a wonderful experience. One of the things another interesting thing, my chapter, we are private sector. So a lot of the things I go to Olympia to discuss, first of all, we're food service. I had to learn a lot about the paraeducator bill, funding, what the training days mean, in order to be able to go represent paraeducators. SEB, that does not apply to my group. So I've had to learn, and I'm not going to tell you that I'm the expert at all, but I had to learn so that I could go talk to our legislators and explain how important SEB is to our members and why it's important that it is supported by the legislature. So that's been really good for me personally, to look outside of my own group, my own box, and how do I serve? That's what I'm doing. That's why I'm doing it. So I've had to really learn and grow in order to be able to advocate on behalf of all of our members. And I am so grateful for that. That's a huge opportunity. And I've had this, it's been a very, very interesting year for all of us. One of the first things I did, which I probably wouldn't have done 6 years ago, once school shut down, the very next day, I was on the phone and emailing my legislators with questions about my chapter and my members and what the changing unemployment laws were going to mean, what all of that, how that was going to impact our members. And I wouldn't have known how to do that had I not served on the council for so long. It feels so short, actually, 3 years. But We've also had a lot of opportunities, partly because of the pandemic and Zoom. We were able to sit in on interviews with statewide officials. You know, Lieutenant Governor, we sat with Denny Heck and Mark Elias, and that's an incredible opportunity and an incredible experience. I was able to, and I don't know that this is from my legislative work, but I was able to serve on the OSPI state work group. And I'm a lunch lady. That is huge. That is just huge professional growth, huge professional opportunity. I feel like serving on the council is it's a little outside my box. I get nervous, but it has given me so much that, again, I'm just grateful. And I also I should tell you, so Zone 11 is on the west side, the wet side of the state, and Everett is kind of a central. If you're not from the west side, if you know Everett, you know Boeing, that's in my zone. We also have a lot of rural, very rural areas, small towns, a lot of big dynamic growth. It's a very diverse and interesting area. And one of the things that has struck me about the legislators that I have worked with over the last 3 years in this zone in particular, they are so supportive of education. Sometimes, you know, some of them might not necessarily understand classified work, but they are open and they're hearing and they are learning. So that's a little bit about the zone. And I could probably talk about this subject in council and how much it has meant to me for a long time, but I believe we're on a time limit. So I think it's time for the next slide.
Thanks, Jody. The election information. Re-electing Superintendent Chris Reichtel was probably the #1 priority for the 2020 election cycle. PSE did phone banking for Reichtel. Governor Inslee was elected to a rare third term. You just don't see that very often. A former PSE representative and Congressman Denny Heck was elected as Lieutenant Governor. A PSE field rep. I just want you to hear that. A former PSE field rep is our Lieutenant Governor. Do you think that he's going to be concerned about PSE? He will have a depth and a wealth of information on how PSE works and the struggles within PSE, and he is elected as our Lieutenant Governor. The former Legislative District 30 representative in Federal Way, Mike Pelliciotti, was elected as the state representative. To me, those are pretty big. We were able to be a part of all those interviews. Every candidate was asked the same questions. And because of Zoom, so many people who would have not met any of these people on this paper or on this screen, we would have never got to hear their answers. We would have never got to hear their heart on our platforms issues. But because we were able to do it through Zoom, many, many council members from across the state were able to be a part of key state questions and interviews, which was really key. And, you know, I'm truly hoping that in the future we'll continue with that. There's not much more to say in regards to that. We have another slide where Jody can kind of share the bipartisan facet of how PSE is and some of the statistics on the Democrats and Republicans. So next slide, please, Jody and Jennifer.
So certainly we can leave the list up for a few minutes if anybody wants to read all of it. So all of our PSE endorsed statewide incumbents were reelected. 80 PSE endorsed candidates won election or re-election to the House and the Senate, and 10 first-time PSE endorsed candidates won election, 9 to the House, 1 to the Senate. And what is really interesting that Cheryl and I both thought was important to share is that just how bipartisan PSE is. When we do our endorsements are based on, do these candidates support us? Do they support classified staff? Do they understand our work? Do they support unions? And it's not a Democrat or a Republican issue. This is all about PSE. So of the 92 candidates that we endorsed, 68% were Democrat, 32% were Republican. Our financial contributions, 65% were Democrat and 35% were Republican. And the current legislature is 58.5% Democrat and 41.5% Republican. And I really think that says a lot about our state, that we are that bipartisan. And I think that takes us to the next slide, Miss Jennifer.
Thanks, Jody. PSE had quite an involvement in the 2020 election season. We did phone banking for candidates, Reichdahl postcards out to all the members. There were focused postcards for legislative districts 19, 28, 42, and 44. Postcard and emails for legislative district 5. Let me read my note here. In legislative district 44, April Berg was a new candidate. She's going to be an incredible candidate that's going to represent PSE well. That zone is really building a relationship with her. Legislative District 5, Mark Mullet and Ingrid Anderson. Mark Mullet won by 57 votes. They did an automatic recount due to the closeness of this race. Our involvement in these races are critical. It's critical. We help get the word out. We don't determine who you would like to vote for, but a well-informed and educated member can make their decisions better. Our job as the council is to get information into your hands so that you can research your passions and your concerns and make an informed vote. We try to be as anonymous as possible. Our job is to get the information in your hands, so when it comes time for you to vote and make that decision, you have all the information that you need to research to make an educated vote. Next slide, Jennifer. This is you, Jody.
Oh, it's me again. These are our newly elected members of the Senate. And I don't think we had too much to say there. Next slide. These are your newly elected members of the House. And we just had a couple interesting points. And you'll see this kind of going to cover the next slide as well. Mike Pelliciotti was representative in Legislative District 30. He is now our state treasurer. Gail Tarleton was representative from District 36. She ran for Secretary of State. We interviewed her. We liked her a lot. We liked Kim Wyman a lot. And ultimately, Kim Wyman won Secretary of State. And then we also had District 42. believe I've lost my notes. Anyway, so there we are here, and District 42 flipped from Republican to Democrat. And then I think, Cheryl, we're on to the next slide.
All right. This is the hot topic of questions right now that I'm getting. What are you doing with our dues money? Emails. Well, where does my dues money really go? It's the same answer for everybody. This flyer is up on the PSE portal, and you can download it and review it. The key thing that I'd like to point out on here, if you look at this pie chart, is 42.63% of your dues money goes to chapter and member representation. That's just a little under half of your dues money directly related to chapter and member representation. That's a pretty big percentage of a return on investment, to know that 42% of your dues are going to could very possibly represent you and save your job one day. That's an important thing. The rest of them you can read through. We'll leave this up for a second. This flyer is on your portal at pseclassified.org. You would log into your portal. You will be able to find this on your portal and download it if you want to keep it or share with anybody else. But member representation is negotiating enforcement of your contract. Isn't it great that you have a team that can bargain and negotiate your contract? Well, sometimes they have to buy stuff to do that. Communications, political, legislative work, legal action, and research. Your dues and what you give supports everything that our union does. Without your dues, our union does not have the backbone, the strength, and the power that we have today. We can go on to the next slide.
Thank you, Cheryl. Many of you are probably familiar with COPE. If you've attended many events that PSE puts on, you've probably run into our good friend Ray, who is a great advocate for COPE. COPE is our Committee on Political Education. And this is how PSE can help build our political power. And I know sometimes that seems like a dirty word, political power, but everything that we work for requires legislation. SEB requires legislation, the Paraeducator Bill, protection of pensions and retirements, safety, work safety, all of that requires legislative action. So we have to be able to go advocate. We have to do this political work. Currently, 2,000 members contribute. I'm a contributor. I'm sure that's a shock. Right now, our contributions are just over $130,000 a year. And as a bonus, if you go to your portal and you sign up for COPE and you voluntarily put money into this Committee on Political Education, you could win a chance to attend political events, functions. There could be travel. It could even be an SEIU event or conference, which is, of course, our international sister. So if you have any questions about COPE, just feel free to get a hold of Cheryl or myself. Go to your portal and just sign up. And I think that's it.
One more slide.
One more?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes.
So, as Jody said, what can you do? You can begin contributing to COPE by filling out a COPE authorization form today. You can go up on your portal today and fill that out. If you already contribute to COPE, we want to give you a huge thank you. Without your contributions, we cannot do the work that is desperately needed to do in legislation today. You can also consider increasing your contributions. With that, this is our last slide. Again, I want to thank you all for coming and attending and watching this session. And we will come back in a little bit for the unconference for questions. I don't know, Rick or Rich, if you guys want to close this out, or if that would be it. We can come back. We come back at 10:15, I believe, for the
7:15
or 7:15. 7:15 for the unconference at a kind of a question and answer open forum.
We did just post the link to the next meeting, the unconference session on the chat again, and you can just click on that and join us in that meeting in just a couple moments.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all for attending.
Thank you.